The Ticket Taker by Trisha McKee. Irene was still new to driving. It had only been 2 months since she had passed her driver's test by the skin of her young teeth. So as she drove down a deserted road in a town 20 minutes past anything she was familiar with, she wondered if she had taken a wrong turn. It was her mother that had insisted she drive out to see about the job. It could be fun, she'd suggested, although the unnaturally high pitch of her voice gave away her true thoughts. She'd known Irene would hate it. Going to the movies was always a treat. When it was at a big theater showing the latest chick flick or comedy, Irene was all for it. She could even tolerate the action films when her boyfriend Chet got to pick. Usually with a large group of friends eating fresh popcorn with melted butter drizzled all over it. That was fun. But this, she groaned, spotting a shadow in the distance. Was that the building? She drove toward it, making out a dilapidated structure. The roof sagged on one side, the paint was chipped all over, and the large sign had fallen on one side. The only hint that it was open was by the few cars in the parking lot and the light shining through the broken windows. Her mother had heard about an out-of-the-way theater that showed only old horror flicks. She was told they were hiring, and she'd insisted Irene needed something to do with her summer nights. Irene had understood what she meant. She wanted her to spend less time with Chet. Irene parked her car and got out, looking at her surroundings. There was nothing but a gravel road and overgrown grass, and this faded building. She walked over the uneven stones onto the cracked, bumpy sidewalk. The ticket booth had a broken window, shards of glass on the counter, and at this point, Irene was positive that the building was abandoned. Her mother had misheard. "We're closed." Irene jumped and then leaned forward, trying to make out the shadow beyond the broken glass. An older man with a curved back shuffled further into her view, and she tried not to gasp. His mouth hung open, his tongue fat and white peeking out of a gummy corner, and the inside was a black void, no teeth, no hint of gums, just a muddy blackness. His eyelids were heavy, covering enough of his eyes that no color was evident. He pointed at Irene with a crooked finger, the nail a deep yellow. "We're closed. You need to go." She heard noises inside, the whirling of a film reel, a block of dialogue, a wisp of a note. There was a movie playing somewhere in the building. Instinct told her to turn and leave, but she knew her mother would call to see if she'd made any type of effort. "I'm here for the job," she confessed, straightening. The man squinted his eyes and studied her. "You're a girl. No." "Hey, that's sexism. You can't do that." Again, there were a few moments of awkward silence as the man stared. Finally, his raspy voice asked, "Do you have any boyfriends?" "Yeah, a big mean one. Why?" "Does he like scary movies?" She shrugged, already over this place. "I guess." "You call him. Tell him to come. Tell him to bring his friends. Then you got the job." It was then that Irene noticed the man's words were not matching the movements of his mouth. Her pappy Roland had suffered a stroke weeks before he died, and she remembered something had been off with his face, too. "Fine, I'll call my boyfriend." She watched as he scurried out of the booth and opened the front door for her. She had to bend down to avoid hitting the top frame of the door that hung loose. Seriously, is this place safe? He led her into the main lobby where there were tattered armchairs covered in grime and dust, and ripped posters of old horror flicks pinned to the walls, the corners curled. He pointed out the popcorn machines. "This, you scoop." He demonstrated with the rusty scoop, jabbing it into the pile of stale popcorn. Then he led her back to the ticket booth, taking his arm and brushing the glass pieces off the counter. "Sir, you're going to get cut." But she stared as he swept his arm across the counter over and over until it was clear of any sharp fragments, his skin never once broken. He pointed to the window.
Here, they come up here, you go and let them in.
How much do I charge?
Nothing. It's free tonight. Get them here tonight. Call.
He waited and then snarled, his lips parting as white strings stretched from the bottom to the top lip, that black void in his mouth as murky as ever.
Call!
He squealed in a voice unlike any Irene had heard before. Still, she hesitated, listening to the movie playing in the next room, the walls thin enough that she could make out the roar of a monster. Would Chet even want to come? Hey, Chet answered on the first ring. When you coming over? I'm bored. Chet, I'm at the new job, the movie theater. Oh yeah? How is it? It sounded kind of cool. Old scary movies. Are you busy there? They're showing movies for free. The guy in charge wants to know if you and your friends want to come and watch some movies. He laughed. Ha! Free movies? Hell yeah! Where is it? She gave him directions and reminded him to bring his friends. She hung up and smiled at her new boss, feeling proud that she had managed to drum up business. Maybe she would be made manager. It seemed easy so far. Hey, how much do I get paid? Irene had thought the man was short, but as he straightened, she realized he was well over 6'5", and something about that made her nervous.
You get paid what was agreed upon.
We hadn't even discussed it. Like, I'm not bragging, but I made $10 an hour just scooping ice cream.
Yes, well, we'll double that, of course.
What? She yelped, and then immediately tried to clear the shock from her expression. She did not want him thinking it was too much. Oh, I mean, great. Sounds fair. What are my hours?
Tonight, you work. Go to the window and wait. Show them in when they arrive.
He shuffled off, a cloud of dust dancing around his feet. She wondered if they were in the process of renovating, bringing the building back up to code. Perhaps this was just a preview night to see if anyone would bother driving out to the middle of nowhere. Curious, Irene slowly wandered down the hall, following the noise of what must have been the only theater room in use. She cracked open the door, the beam from the projector highlighting the dust particles. There were a few people scattered throughout the room. The wallpaper was peeling, and the chairs were run down. The velvet backing ripped, and some chairs broken from the floor, tilting sideways and backwards. But there were people staring at the screen. She returned to the front, taking her place in the ticket booth, seeing that the cash register had been ripped out, the drawers were missing, and glass still posed a hazard on the floor. She thought of that guy's arm sweeping the glass without a concern, without one drop of blood, and something nudged at her subconscious. Something edged into her mind, a dark seed of warning. Maybe this was not the place to earn extra cash. But just as she gathered the courage to find the man and tell him she was leaving, Chet pulled into the parking lot, his expression communicating his distaste. He and his friends Gary and Jason slowly climbed out of his new Jeep, and she braced herself for his tirade over what the gravel would do to the paint job. Irene, what the hell? This place is a dump. No way they're showing movies here. They are, I promise. I was just in the theater. There's a movie playing right now. She went to open the door but found another man there, peering through the window. He was just as tall as the other guy, his skin a sickly gray. He turned to stare at her, and she drew back in fear. His eyes looked pure black. As her own eyes adjusted, she realized it must have been a trick of the light, but he had the same empty mouth. The guys came inside, staring at the man and then turning to Irene. Chet moved forward slowly, his large frame still no match for the man in front of him. Irene, what the hell's going on? The man noticed the popcorn.
Do you want some food before you go in? It's all free tonight.
Nah, we don't want your stale-ass popcorn.
The movie is about to start.
The man turned and started to walk toward the steps. Jason leaned forward and whispered, Irene, seriously, what is this? She shrugged. I think they're going to try to bring this theater back, fix it up. They're showing free movies, so free movies. The guys continued to stare at her skeptically until the man turned and cleared his throat.
Come on, the movie's starting.
Irene noticed that his words were not matching the movement of his mouth, but the group of guys stared back at him and then sluggishly stepped forward. "I'll come in and see if you guys are okay in a bit, okay, Chet? Chet!" But he was already focused on seeing the movie and didn't even turn around. Irene managed to find a broom and worked at sweeping the glass into a far corner where it was unlikely to do much damage. Then she remembered she had a water out in the car. She pushed on the front door, and it did not budge.
"Is there a problem?"
She spun around and saw the first man, and this time it looked as though there were a cloud of gnats swarming around his open mouth. She stammered, I wanted to go get something out of my car. I'm thirsty. Hungry." He motioned toward the counter.
"There's all kinds of candy back there. We keep the door locked during the movie. Safety precaution."
"Safety precaution? You can't lock the doors. It's a fire hazard. Hey, I need to..." But he was already walking away. Irene realized she was hungry and decided to check out the assortment of candy. There was a good selection, and she chose her favorite chocolate bar, unwrapped it, and brought it up to her mouth before she saw something wiggle. Looking closer, she saw maggots crawling in and out of the tiny holes in the chocolate. She screamed, threw it down, and ran out from behind the counter. "Mom!" she cried into the phone. "Mom, this theater is just an old building full of dirty old people. I need you to come get me." Her mother sighed. "Irene, stop trying to get out of work." "Mom, please, listen. They locked the door. I can't get out. I need you to come get me, please. I'm scared." She started to cry, and there were a few beats of silence on the other end. "Okay, hon. Give me some time to get out there. Are you safe?" "I don't know. They locked the door and won't let me out." "I'm on my way." She hung up and then went to find Chet. She would give him a heads up. Maybe if they all tried to leave, he would let them out. Then she could call her mom and tell her not to worry. She heard the movie and again tiptoed into the theater. Chet, Jason, and Gary were all sitting separately in different rows, and she found that odd. But she rushed down the aisle and tapped on Chet's shoulder. He continued watching the movie. "Chet, they locked the doors. They're not letting us out. Chet, hey!" Irene shoved his shoulder, but he continued staring straight ahead. "Damn it, come on! Your mother's going to hate me more than she already does." She turned and walked a few rows back to where Jason was sitting. "Hey, Jason!" She waved her hand in front of his face. "Nice. You assholes!" She walked across the aisle to where a stranger was sitting, his eyes unblinking. "Sir?" And her blood ran cold. No one was responding. Either Chet and his followers had managed to convince everyone to prank her, or something sinister was in play. Irene felt the hairs on the back of her arm stand up as she stood there and watched a room full of men stare ahead, unmoving, unblinking, with the monsters on the screen roaring and growling and stalking. This might be some distasteful joke, but Irene was not willing to risk it. The door to the theater started to creak open. Panicked, she dove into an empty row, army crawling her way to the end and then sliding her thankfully slim enough body under the seats.
"This is the batch of planters collected tonight,"
one guy stated, but the voice seemed to vibrate in the air, a tin can-like quality to it. Irene moved so that she could peek out, and saw the two men she had encountered walking with two more men that were similar in height and gait. In between the men walked a statuesque woman. It was obvious she was something other than human. Her skin was tinted blue and glowed a pearly white. Her long hair a myriad of colors with actual sparks flying from the ends as she moved. She was mesmerizing and haunting all at once, and Irene felt ice-cold tremors invading her body as she watched her. The woman creature glided, and Irene noticed that her feet did not touch the ground. "Very good," she declared, her mouth not moving as she spoke. She proceeded to go to every guy sitting in the theater and press her nose against the top of their head. As she pressed her head against Gary's head, she stilled. "This one has no seeds. He cannot properly plant." As she walked away, one of the guys went up to Gary, clamping his hand down on his head. His fingers pressed into Gary's scalp until it started to cave in, the man's fingers pressing into his brain matter. Then, with a jerk, he twisted Gary's head until Irene heard the snap. She pressed her palm against her mouth to keep from screaming. "The rest are good. We will take them to the women tonight. With the female's strength and the human's appearance, we will have the strongest hybrids." The woman creature turned to the man beside her, appraising him with obvious distaste. "Perhaps we can fix our previous blunders." They left the room, the movie still playing, the people still staring straight ahead. Irene counted to 20 and then scooted out. She stood and rushed down the aisle, consciously avoiding the sight of Gary's oddly twisted head, but she felt the stare of his still open eyes. Checking the lobby, she then rushed into the empty theater room just as she felt her phone vibrate. "Mom?" "Irene, where are you? I followed the directions I was given and there's nothing here." "Mom, keep driving. It's here. Those directions brought me here." "No, honey, it's a dead end. Think, Irene. Did you take any turns that weren't specified? Anything?" Irene swallowed a scream and worked at keeping her voice low. "Mom, no, I swear. I gave the same directions to Chet and he's here. But, Mom, they killed Gary." "What? Irene, is this some kind of joke?" "No, please, Mom. Mommy, please come get me. Please, help me. Mommy." She started to cry, but then the door creaked open, and she plunged the phone into her pocket and scooted herself under a row of seats.
"She has to be here somewhere."
Two men stomped down the aisle, glancing back and forth.
"There's nowhere to go."
She held her breath until she heard them leaving. Then she tried to clear her head, to plan. Something had to give. She had to get a break. This was not the end. The door creaked open again, and Chet's voice sailed into the room. "Irene, are you here? I'm scared." She cried out, and then started sobbing in relief, wiggling out and standing. "Oh my God, Chet, we have to get out of here." She froze. The man in front of her was Chet, except there were silver beams shooting out of hollowed eye sockets. He stiffly turned and called out, his mouth not moving. "She's in here." She was grabbed and pulled, and there was no fighting back. Their strength was inhuman, their power overwhelming. They tossed her into a pitch-dark room, and she tumbled over something lumpy. She tried to get her balance, but tripped over another lump. As she fell, her hands landed on something soft, squishy, and she realized she was on top of a pile of bodies. She realized there was skin and hair, and a scream was wrenched from within her. It was a pile of girls, like they'd been discarded. No need for females. They weren't planters. A noise like an air conditioner coming on got her attention. A gas was being pumped into the room. Irene said a silent thanks and accepted what she hoped would be a painless end. She had never even enjoyed monster movies. End. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Cosmic Horror Readings. If you'd like to hear more, please subscribe to the channel or head over to cosmichorrormonthly.com. Enjoy.